could lead to a lack of control in others.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then beyond these individual benefits,
Yeah.
the text also highlights, like,
Islam today.
well, I'm excited.
Yeah, this is going to be really interesting. So we're going to be looking at 70 matters related to fasting. It's by Sheikh Muhammed, Sali, Al-Munajjid.
Hmm?
And it's not like, just like a simple like how-to guide. It's a lot more than that, right?
Right.
It gets into like the rules, like the proper etiquette, the spiritual like depth of fasting.
Yeah, it's amazing how it reveals these layers of meaning, especially during Ramadan.
Yeah.
It's like peeling back an onion.
I love that. Peeling back an onion.
Yeah, and like with every layer you're uncovering,
Right.
like deeper and deeper significance to this practice.
Oh, I like that a lot. Okay, so let's start with like the core idea here. What exactly is fasting in Islam?
Well, the text defines the Arabic word for fasting, which is Siyaam,
Okay.
as abstaining from specific things from
Yeah.
dawn till sunset.
Right.
But it's more than just like abstaining. You have to have like sincere intention, with a conscious awareness of your connection with Allah.
So it's not just about the physical act.
Yeah.
It's about the spiritual intention behind it.
Exactly. And that intention or niyyah is crucial. It's like
Yeah.
setting a goal for like a workout.
Uh-huh.
Without a clear goal,
Mhm.
you're less likely to push yourself or even see those results.
Right.
And it's similar with fasting,
Mhm.
Approaching it with a sincere intention makes it more than just like going through the motions.
Right.
It becomes a conscious act of worship and spiritual growth.
I see. Aligning your actions with that deeper purpose.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, the text also really emphasizes that fasting during Ramadan is obligatory for adult Muslims.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, it even cites a verse from the Quran,
Okay.
2.183,
Mm-hmm.
and a hadith that compares breaking the fast without a valid reason to some pretty serious sins. This highlights how absolutely central fasting is to Islam.
Wow. Yeah. Those are some strong words for sure. But on the flip side, the text also talks about immense rewards for those who fast sincerely.
Oh, absolutely. It mentions Allah's ice, called
Oh,
Ar-Rayyan,
heck.
which is reserved specifically for those who fast.
Wow. So it's like it's a huge deal. It paints a picture of the spiritual benefit.
Yeah, profound spiritual benefits associated with this practice.
That's incredible how fasting connects to like spiritual growth and purification.
It's true. The text quotes a hadith that says, fasting is for Allah alone,
Okay.
and He rewards it without measure.
So it's a deeply personal act of worship.
Yes.
But I'm also curious about the broader benefits of fasting. What else does the text highlight?
Well, it lists several benefits,
Okay.
and each one kind of offers a unique perspective. One that I find really insightful is attaining taqwa through fasting.
Taqwa. Okay, unpack that for us a little bit. What does that mean?
So taqwa means piety. And the idea is that by choosing to abstain from things that are normally permissible to you, you develop this heightened awareness
Okay.
of your relationship with Allah,
Yeah.
which makes it easier to avoid what's forbidden. It's like
Right.
building spiritual muscle.
I like that. You're training yourself to resist even the smallest temptations, and then it strengthens your overall willpower.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And this self-control
Yeah.
extends to our desires and actions. The text suggests that by keeping the stomach empty, you're better able to keep other desires in check.
Right.
It's like fasting helps you cultivate a sense of balance
Hmm.
and moderation in all areas of life.
It makes you think about how overindulgence in one area could lead to a lack of control in others.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then beyond these individual benefits,
Yeah.
the text also highlights the social impact of fasting.
Yeah.
By experiencing hunger, you develop empathy for those who experience it on a daily basis.
Right.
It fosters compassion
Yeah.
and a desire to help those less fortunate.
It's one thing to understand poverty intellectually, but it's another to actually experience even a sliver of it firsthand.
You're absolutely right. Fasting bridges that gap
Yeah.
and fosters a sense of shared humanity.
I like that. And the text also points out that fasting promotes unity within the Muslim community.
Yeah.
Right? Because everyone's fasting together, they're breaking their fast together,
Yes.
sharing this experience.
And it strengthens the bonds of community.
It sounds like Ramadan, especially, is a time of profound collective spiritual experience.
It really is.
Yeah.
And this shared experience can also create opportunities for dawah,
Okay.
which is inviting others to learn about Islam.
Okay.
People are often more open to spiritual discussions during Ramadan.
Right, right.
So it's an ideal time for outreach and dialogue.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So we've covered the definition of fasting, its spiritual significance, and then some personal and social benefits.
Right.
Now, let's get into the practice itself. What does the text say about the etiquette?
Yeah. And the recommended practices of fasting.
So this is where the text really shines. It delves into the etiquette and the Sunnah,
Okay.
which are the practices of the Prophet Muhammad,
Right.
offering a detailed guide for those who want to fast in the most authentic way.
Okay. This is what I was hoping for.
Good.
Let's get into the specifics.
All right. So for starters, the text emphasizes the importance of suhoor, the pre-dawn meal,
Right.
and it recommends delaying it until just before Fajr prayer, citing a hadith about blessings being found in suhoor.
Oh.
It's not just about filling your stomach. It's about starting the day with a spiritual intention.
So it's a mindful practice, not just like a rushed bite to eat before the fast begins.
Precisely. And on the other end of the day,
Yeah.
the text advises against delaying iftar, the evening meal that breaks the fast.
Right. I imagine there are recommended practices for iftar as well.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The text details the Prophet's preferred way to break the fast, with fresh dates.
Followed by dry dates, if fresh ones aren't available.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, water.
Oh, wow.
And it even includes the supplication to recite after iftar, which really brings this practice to life.
The level of detail is incredible. It's like stepping back in time and witnessing the Prophet's example firsthand.
Right.
Yeah.
It gives you a sense of the reverence and intention behind every aspect of fasting, from the niyah
Right.
to the specific actions.
Okay. Are there other etiquette guidelines the text highlights?
Yes, quite a few.
Yeah.
One that stood out to me is the emphasis on avoiding sins while fasting,
Okay.
especially lying and backbiting.
Yeah.
There are several hadiths emphasizing this point,
Right.
reminding us that fasting is about purifying ourselves internally and externally.
So it's about aligning your actions with your spiritual intentions.
Exactly.
Right.
And the text also advises against distractions, like excessive entertainment,
Yeah.
pointless gatherings.
Mm-hmm.
The focus should be on worship, reflection, and connecting with Allah.
So creating space for that spiritual growth, both by abstaining from like physical desires and also minimizing those distractions.
You've got it. And this ties into the importance of patience and controlling anger while fasting.
Right. Yeah.
There's even a hadith about saying, I am fasting if someone provokes you,
Oh, wow.
as a reminder to maintain your composure.
It's like turning the experience into a spiritual training ground for self-discipline.
It is. It definitely takes a lot of willpower
Yes.
to maintain composure when you're hungry.
Yeah.
But, that seems to be part of the point.
Yeah.
And the text acknowledges this, encouraging us to see fasting as an opportunity to strengthen our willpower and self-control.
Right.
It also ties into the emphasis on generosity and good deeds during Ramadan,
Right.
remembering the Prophet's own increased generosity during this time.
So it's like a balance between that inward self-discipline and outward generosity.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the text even suggests combining fasting with feeding the poor as a powerful means of earning rewards
Right.
and drawing closer to Allah.
That's beautiful. It links individual practice with social responsibility.
It really speaks to that holistic nature of Islam,
Yeah.
where spiritual growth is interconnected with actions towards others.
I like that a lot. Okay, so we've covered the definition, the importance, the benefits, some etiquette of fasting.
Right.
What else does this text kind of unpack?
Well, it goes on to differentiate between different types of fasting
Okay.
and clarifies rulings for various situations, like the prohibition of fasting on certain days
Right.
and exemptions for those who are traveling,
Okay.
ill,
Well,
elderly, or pregnant or breastfeeding.
this is exactly the kind of detailed information I was hoping to learn about.
Good.
It's like peeling back those layers.
Yes.
Going from the core concept to the nuanced applications.
Yeah, and those nuances are important because they show how Islam adapts to individual circumstances while upholding the spirit of the practice.
I'm so eager to dive into those details, but we're going to have to pause here.
Okay.
So be sure to join us for part 2
Yes.
as we explore those intricacies of the different types of fasting and exemptions.
Looking forward to it.
Me too. All right, welcome back to our deep dive. We're talking fasting in Islam. We left off talking about types of fasting, like what kinds there are and exemptions. Where do you want to pick up from there?
Okay, yeah, so the text, first, it distinguishes between fasts that are observed on consecutive days,
Okay.
like Ramadan, and expiatory fasts, versus those that are not,
Right.
that don't require consecutive days.
Okay, that's helpful. What's an example of a fast that doesn't have to be consecutive?
Making up for missed days of Ramadan
Oh, yeah, right.
is a common one. The text also lists various voluntary fasts, like Ashura, Arafah, the Ayyam al-Bid,
Right.
Mondays and Thursdays, and the 6 days of Shawwal.
Wow. There's a lot. It's like a whole tapestry of fasting practices.
It's really fascinating to see all the different...
It shows the richness of the tradition, yeah.
Right.
But I'm curious about what the text says regarding, like, what's prohibited or disliked.
Okay. When it comes to fasting,
Yeah.
that's an important aspect too.
Right.
For instance, the text explicitly prohibits fasting on Eid days
Right.
and the Ayyam al-Tashriq,
Okay.
which follow Eid al-Adha.
Yeah.
These are like days of celebration and feasting,
Oh, yeah, right.
marking the completion of Hajj.
That makes sense. There's a time for fasting and a time for feasting, right?
Exactly.
And those days are definitely for feasting.
Right, yeah.
Okay, what about fasting on Friday or Saturday? Does the text say anything about that?
It does. It goes into detail about the rulings on that,
Okay.
which have specific considerations.
Okay. What about fasting for extended periods? Does the text talk about that at all?
Yes, it forbids
Okay.
fasting for an entire lifetime or consecutive days without any breaks.
Okay. Yeah.
So, even with voluntary fasting, you have to remember balance and moderation.
Right, our key.
It seems like that's a recurring theme in Islamic teachings.
Yeah.
Like finding that middle ground,
Absolutely.
Okay, so we talked about types of fasting and things that are prohibited. What about determining the start of Ramadan?
Okay.
I know there's often discussion about moon sightings and calculations.
Yeah, it's very clear in the text.
Mhm.
Ramadan begins with the sighting of the new moon, or by completing 30 days of Shaban,
Okay.
the previous lunar month.
So it's primarily based on observation, not just relying on calculations.
That's right. Okay.
The text really stresses that citing the new moon
Yeah.
or receiving reliable confirmation from a trustworthy source
Mm-hmm.
is the basis for determining the start of Ramadan.
Right.
And it considers using calculations alone to be an innovation.
Right.
Something that's like not rooted in the Prophet's teachings or early Islamic practice.
I see. So that emphasis on connecting to those like original sources and practices. Okay. Now, we talked about exemptions from fasting earlier.
Right.
Does the text go into more detail about like who those exemptions apply to?
Yes, it
Okay.
does. It covers exemptions for travelers,
Right.
for those who were ill, the elderly, and pregnant or breastfeeding women.
All right, let's break those down a little bit. What about travelers?
Okay.
What conditions need to be met for them to be exempt from fasting?
Okay, so the text mentions that the journey should be like lengthy,
Okay.
going beyond just like the city and its suburbs.
Okay, so it's not just a quick trip. It's
No.
like a genuine journey.
A genuine journey. And the journey shouldn't be for sinful purposes or like deliberately to avoid fasting.
Right, so it should have a like legitimate purpose.
Exactly.
Wow.
And then the text, it emphasizes that the traveler is permitted to break their fast,
Yep.
regardless of whether like they find it difficult
Right.
or even if they have support.
So even if it's like a relatively easy journey, they're still permitted.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. What about those who are ill? When are they exempt?
So the text allows exemption
Mm-hmm.
for any illness that makes a person like, feel unwell or
Right.
feel like hardship.
Okay.
But it's important to note,
Yeah.
That like minor ailments like a cough or a headache
Mm-hmm.
aren't considered valid reasons to break the fast.
Okay, so there's a level of discernment involved.
Yes. And if there's like medical evidence
Mm-hmm.
or certainty
Right.
that fasting would worsen the illness or delay recovery,
Right.
breaking the fast is not only permitted,
Yeah.
but even disliked,
Oh, okay.
according to the text.
So it's putting like health and well-being first.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, when it comes to serious illness,
Mm-hmm.
the text says you don't even have to make like the intention
Yeah, okay.
to fast the night before
Mm-hmm.
if there's a possibility of like recovery by the morning.
So it's about focusing on like the present moment.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. Now, what about like if someone falls unconscious during the day? How does that affect their fast?
Okay, so the text,
Mm-hmm.
it provides specific guidance on this too.
Okay.
It says that
Yeah.
if someone loses consciousness, but recovers before sunset,
Mhm.
their fast is like still valid,
Okay.
assuming they had like the intention to fast
Mhm.
that morning.
Mhm.
But if they're like unconscious
Mm-hmm.
from dawn until sunset, most scholars consider the fast invalid.
Okay. What about like making up for missed fasts in those situations?
Okay, so the majority of scholars
Mm-hmm.
believe that anyone who falls unconscious,
Yeah.
regardless of like the duration,
Right.
must make up the missed fasts later.
Okay. What about cases like, say, taking sleeping pills or undergoing anesthesia?
Oh, okay. So that's a great question.
Yeah.
Some scholars have addressed those situations
Okay.
specifically, and they suggest that if, someone's unconscious for 3 days or less
Yeah.
due to like medication or anesthesia,
Mm-hmm.
they must make up the fasts.
Okay.
However, if they're unconscious for more than 3 days,
Yeah.
they don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
Comparing it to someone who's like insane.
Wow. Okay. It's like the accountability is tied to consciousness and awareness.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay. So these are all really interesting, nuanced rulings
Yeah.
that demonstrate how Islamic scholars, apply these principles to like real life situations.
In real life situations, even complex medical
Right,
ones.
exactly. Okay. What about the elderly? When are they exempt from fasting?
The text, it offers a very compassionate ruling for
Yeah.
the very elderly who are like losing their strength,
Mm-hmm.
nearing death.
Okay.
They're permitted not to fast
Okay.
if it would be too difficult.
Right.
And the Quran itself, it
Mhm.
offers an alternative.
Okay.
They can feed a poor person for each day they miss.
Okay. So it acknowledges their vulnerability
Yeah,
and offers a way to fulfill the spirit of the practice, even if they can't physically fast.
exactly.
Okay. What about like the mentally incapacitated? Does the text address that?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
It states that, those who are like senile or confused, don't have to fast or perform other, religious duties.
Right.
And their families aren't obligated to do these things for them.
Okay, so the focus shifts from obligation to more like, care and compassion in those cases.
Right. And if someone is like sometimes of sound mind
Yeah.
and sometimes confused,
Okay.
the ruling is that they fast when they are able.
Right.
Are exempt when they're not.
Okay. So it's about adapting to individual capabilities. Right. Okay, so we've covered exemptions based on travel, illness, age, and mental capacity. Are there any other situations the text addresses?
Yes.
Okay.
It mentions those fighting an enemy.
Okay.
Or like under siege.
Right.
And if fasting would like significantly weaken them, they are permitted to break their fast.
Okay.
Even if they like aren't traveling.
So it's about prioritizing their ability to, defend themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
And there's even a historical example
okay.
of the prophet advising his companions not to fast
Okay.
before battle, to maintain their strength.
Wow, that's so interesting. It's like not just a theoretical ruling, it was applied in real situations.
It is.
Yeah. The text also addresses like a more social aspect, right? It asks whether those with valid exemptions should eat or drink openly or discreetly.
Yeah.
What does it say about that?
Okay, so it advises that if the reason for not fasting is like obvious,
Right.
like illness,
Okay.
then there's no need to like hide it.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
if the reason's like less apparent, like menstruation,
Right.
then it's recommended to be discreet
Okay.
to avoid any like speculation or judgment.
Okay. So it's a sensitive approach that respects both like the individual and those social norms.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Speaking of like individual considerations, we talked about niyah or intention before. Does the text go into more detail on that?
Yes, it dedicates like a significant section to the concept of niyah.
Okay.
Emphasizing its like vital role in fasting. And it states that intention is a prerequisite for obligatory fasts.
Okay.
Like Ramadan, expiatory fasts, making up missed fasts.
Okay, so it's not enough to just abstain from food and drink.
Right.
You have to have that conscious intention behind it.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the text clarifies that, this intention can be made anytime during the night before dawn.
Okay. Does it need to be a verbal declaration?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
The text explains that, simply knowing Ramadan has started.
Yeah.
And wanting to fast is enough.
So it's more about that inner resolve.
Exactly.
Okay. And repeating the intention each night isn't necessary.
Right.
Okay.
But it should be renewed if, you break your fast for a valid reason and start again.
Okay. Are there like specific guidelines for breaking the fast on the other end?
There are.
Okay.
And they're quite precise. The text states that the fast is broken at sunset.
Okay.
When the entire disk of the sun disappears.
Okay.
Below the horizon.
Okay.
Not just when like the glow starts to fade.
So there's like a very specific moment.
A very specific moment.
Interesting. And I recall you mentioned before that it's disliked to delay breaking the fast.
Yes. There's a recommended practice of hastening to break the fast. The Prophet Muhammad himself would break his fast before praying Maghrib.
Okay.
It's seen as like a moment of joyful anticipation.
So there's like a sense of eagerness.
Eagerness, yes.
Not dragging it out.
Exactly.
Okay. Are there specific things that break the fast?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The text outlines various, actions and substances that break the fast.
Right.
And it divides them into three main categories.
Yeah, okay.
Actions involving the expulsion of bodily fluids.
Okay.
Actions involving ingestion.
Right.
And things that are considered like similar to eating or drinking.
All right, I want to explore those categories in more detail, but we have to pause for now. We'll talk about what breaks the fast and the rulings for women when we come back for the final part of our deep dive. All right, welcome back to the final part of our deep dive on 70 matters related to fasting. I'm excited to get into some of these specifics about what breaks a fast and the rulings that are there for women.
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting because, we go beyond just listing the rules. We get to see like the principles and the wisdom behind them.
I love that.
Yeah. So let's start with, the most serious offense.
Okay.
Intentionally eating or drinking during the day in Ramadan without a valid excuse.
Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. What does the text say about that?
Well, it emphasizes that this is a major sin.
Okay.
And the individual, must sincerely repent and make up for that missed fast later.
Okay.
And it highlights that breaking the fast with something forbidden, like alcohol, would, make the sin even more severe.
Oh, okay. So the severity really depends on the circumstances.
Right. It's not just a blanket rule.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it stresses that it's not just about outwardly making up the fast, but about like genuine remorse and a commitment to avoid repeating that action.
Right. So there's an inner transformation involved as well.
Yes, exactly.
That makes me wonder, what about those times where maybe you accidentally break your fast? Like, say, you forget you're fasting and you take a bite of food. I'm sure many of us have done that.
Oh, yeah. I think we've all been there.
Yeah.
The text addresses this with a beautiful hadith that says, if he forgets and eats or drinks, then let him complete his fast, for Allah has fed him and given him to drink.
Oh, wow. That's so comforting.
It is.
It really emphasizes, like, Allah's mercy and understanding.
Exactly. It highlights that the focus is on the intention behind the fast, even if honest mistakes happen.
Right, right. That makes me think, what if you see someone else eating or drinking and they seem to have forgotten their fasting? What's the proper etiquette there? Do you call them out?
Well, the text encourages gently reminding the person, citing a verse from the Quran, about helping one another in righteousness.
Right,
and it
right.
emphasizes that this reminder should be, an act of kindness, not like judgment or
It's about
criticism.
supporting each other, not shaming.
Yeah, exactly. It speaks to that, community aspect of Islam that we discussed earlier, where, people help each other uphold their religious obligations.
Right, right. Okay. So we talked about like intentional and unintentional breaking of the fast. What about situations where it's necessary to break the fast, like maybe to save someone's life?
Right. The text very clearly states that breaking the fast is allowed in those situations, even, giving examples like rescuing someone from like drowning or putting out a fire.
So preserving life takes precedence over the outward act of fasting.
Exactly. And it speaks to that, flexibility and wisdom embedded within Islamic teachings.
Yeah, that's really cool. Okay, let's get into some more specific examples of things that pluck the fast. We talked about intercourse, vomiting, and cupping earlier. Can you elaborate on those a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's start with intercourse. The text makes it clear that intentionally engaging in intercourse during the day in Ramadan, without a valid reason like illness or travel, breaks the fast.
Right.
And it requires both repentance and making up the fast later.
I'm curious, even though, the fast is technically broken, does the person still have to abstain from food and drink for the rest of the day?
Yeah, they do. The text stresses that, even though the fast is broken, they should still refrain from eating and drinking, for the remainder of the day.
Okay.
Out of respect for the sanctity of the month.
Okay, so it's about aligning your actions with the spirit of the fast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As much as possible.
Okay. And they also have to offer like expiation, right?
Right.
On top of making up for the fast.
Yes, they do.
Does the text talk about what that entails?
It does.
Okay.
It cites a hadith where the Prophet Muhammad outlines 3 options: freeing a slave, fasting for 2 consecutive months, or feeding 60 poor people.
Wow. Those are pretty significant acts.
They are. They really show the weight of the transgression.
Yeah, yeah. And the text even adds that if someone, breaks the fast by eating and then has intercourse, that the sin is even more serious.
Yeah.
Because they've kind of violated the sanctity of the month twice.
Right. There's a cumulative effect.
Right. It's not just about adding up the individual acts.
Right. It highlights how, these actions are interconnected, and it underscores that importance of approaching Ramadan with a sincere heart.
Right. With the right intentions.
Absolutely.
Okay. Moving on to vomiting, the text makes a distinction between intentional and unintentional vomiting.
Yes.
So does any kind of vomiting break the fast?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
The text quotes a hadith that says, whoever vomits unintentionally does not have to make up the fast later on, but whoever vomits on purpose does have to make up the fast.
Okay, so the key is whether the act was deliberate.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
What if someone feels nauseous and is afraid they might vomit? Should they? Should they try to suppress it?
Actually, the text advises against suppressing it
Okay.
if it could be harmful,
Okay.
So health and well-being come first.
Right. Again, that compassion,
Yeah.
putting those things first.
And the text also, addresses those like little accidental things that might happen, like swallowing something unintentionally,
Yeah.
like from a nosebleed or
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
food stuck between your teeth. Yeah.
Right.
As long as those situations are unintentional
Okay.
and, beyond your control,
Yeah.
they don't break the fast.
Oh, good. It seems like the focus is on your genuine intention and effort,
Yeah.
Okay. We also talked about cupping.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember what that is?
Oh, yeah. That's the traditional healing practice where suction cups are applied to the skin.
That's it. The text acknowledges there's a difference of opinion among scholars about whether cupping breaks the fast. So there's not like a definitive answer.
Yeah, it's not that simple.
Okay.
The text mentions that Ibn Taymiyyah,
Okay.
a well-known scholar,
Yeah.
suggested that the person receiving cupping breaks their fast,
Oh, okay.
but the person performing it doesn't.
So there's like an interesting distinction there.
It is interesting.
And that there's, even within Islamic scholarship, there can be these different interpretations.
Exactly. It's a complex and ever-evolving field of study.
Right. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit to the rulings that are specific to women. That takes up a big chunk of the text.
It does.
That's the section I was really curious about.
Okay.
What are some of the key areas that it addresses?
Okay, so first of all, it clarifies the situation of, girls who reach puberty,
Okay.
but delay fasting due to shyness or a lack of understanding.
Right.
And it really emphasizes the importance of, repenting and making up those missed fasts later.
So it recognizes that like social and emotional factors can play a role.
Absolutely.
Especially for young women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it stresses that delaying making up those fasts, until the next Ramadan comes around, actually carries like an additional obligation
Okay.
of feeding a poor person for each missed day
Right.
as expiation.
Okay. So encouraging, taking those obligations seriously and fulfilling them.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, what about married women? Are there specific rulings for them?
Yes. The text says that, a woman shouldn't fast except during Ramadan
Okay.
if her husband is present
Mm-hmm.
without his permission.
That's interesting. What's the reasoning behind that?
Well, it stems from, the understanding of the husband's rights within the marital relationship.
Okay.
Fasting, especially voluntary fasting, could potentially affect marital intimacy.
Okay. Yeah.
So this ruling emphasizes mutual consent
Mm-hmm.
and consideration within the marriage.
I really like how the text addresses not just like, the spiritual aspects of fasting, but also its impacts on, relationships and family dynamics.
Exactly. It's that holistic approach.
Right.
Now, the text also goes into a lot of detail regarding menstruation and fasting.
Okay. That's definitely something I wanted to hear more about.
Yeah.
It can be a little bit confusing.
It can be. The text is very clear,
Mm-hmm.
Once a woman sees the white discharge that signals the end of her period,
Okay.
she should make the intention to fast, from the night before
Mm-hmm.
and resume fasting.
So there's like a clear physical marker.
Yes, and if it's not clear,
Yeah.
when her period ends,
Mm-hmm.
it advises inserting a piece of cotton
Okay.
and checking for blood.
Okay.
If it comes out clean, then she should fast. But if she, starts bleeding again, she should stop.
Wow, that's very practical advice. But what if she, makes the intention to fast, but her period ends during the night and she doesn't have time for gussel before dawn?
Okay, so her fast is still valid in that situation.
Okay.
The intention is what matters most.
Okay, good. Good.
Yeah.
What about like using medication to prevent menstruation in order to fast?
Oh, okay.
Is that permitted?
So the text actually advises against that,
Okay.
recommending that women accept what Allah has decreed for them
Okay.
and be content with making up those missed days later.
Mm-hmm.
It mentions that the Prophet Muhammad's wives follow this practice.
So it's about kind of surrendering to the natural order.
Yeah.
And trusting in Allah's wisdom.
Right.
Yeah.
But it does acknowledge that if a woman does take medication to stop her period and then fasts, it's acceptable.
Okay.
So there's some flexibility there.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so what about like other types of vaginal bleeding, like spotting or, breakthrough bleeding? Do those break the fast?
Okay, so the text states that, non-menstrual bleeding, known as istihada,
Okay.
doesn't invalidate the fast. However, it does make a distinction regarding miscarriage.
Okay, that's what I was wondering about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The text differentiates between miscarriages,
Mm-hmm.
where the fetus has a discernible human form.
Right.
And those where it doesn't.
Okay.
If the fetus is formed,
Yeah.
the bleeding is considered nifas,
Okay.
like postpartum bleeding.
Okay.
And the woman doesn't have to fast. But if the fetus isn't formed,
Yeah.
the bleeding is considered istihada.
Right.
And, she should fast if able.
So the ruling depends on the stage of development.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And it shows, how Islamic jurisprudence really takes into account these complex biological processes.
Okay, that's fascinating.
And speaking of which, we should talk about pregnancy and breastfeeding.
Okay, are there exemptions for women in those situations?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The text considers them similar to those who are ill, allowing them to break the fast and make up the days later, regardless of whether the concern is for, their own health,
right,
the health of their child.
So prioritizing the well-being of both the mother and the child.
Exactly. And the text also addresses the, sensitive topic of a husband forcing his wife.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering about.
To have intercourse.
Okay.
During the day in Ramadan.
Yeah.
And it states that, if the woman consents, then the same ruling applies to her as to her husband.
Right.
Meaning they both need to, repent and offer expiation.
Right.
But if she's forced, she should resist as much as possible.
Okay.
And she doesn't have to offer expiation.
So recognizing the potential for coercion and abuse.
Yeah.
And not burdening the victim.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any other important points you want to highlight?
Yes. The text, clarifies that women are obligated to make up for missed fasts, even without their husband's knowledge or permission.
Okay.
And a husband can't, force his wife to break a fast that she's observing to make up for a missed day.
Okay.
So it really underscores a woman's autonomy.
Right.
In fulfilling, her religious duties.
Yeah. Wow. This deep dive has been incredible. We've gone from the basic definition of fasting to these super intricate rulings.
It's a lot to come.
For all sorts of situations. I feel like I have a much deeper understanding now.
Good.
Than I did before. So thank you for that.
It's been my pleasure.
It's been amazing. It makes me think about the deeper meaning of fasting beyond just abstaining from food and drink, but this journey of self-discipline, spiritual growth, and connecting with Allah on a deeper level.
Beautifully said.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you again for guiding us through this exploration.
You're very welcome.
And for everyone listening, if you're looking for ways to incorporate the principles of fasting into your own life, even if you're not Muslim, there are a lot of great resources available online. Check them out. You can find practices for self-control, building empathy, and seeking a connection with something greater than yourself. Until next time, keep seeking knowledge and keep asking those big questions.